Sammy for another episode of the I Do Music podcast, and our goal and our mission is to empower and educate musicians and artists worldwide. And on today's episode, we're talking to co-owner of Patchwerk Recording Studios and mix engineer Mike Wilson, discussing a few of his favorite sessions such as Beyonce, Outkast, and TLC, how technology has changed the recording process, and being a studio owner. Hey, what's going on? You're tuned into the I Do Music podcast, and I'm your host, Sammy Approved, and we are sitting here with co-owner of Patchwerk Recording Studios and super mix engineer himself, Mike Wilson.
Oh, you done pump me up.
You gotta pump up. You are, though. Don't be humble.
No, I don't think super mix engineer. Just another person working on music.
I think everybody appreciates you and value your mixing capabilities, so that's why I had to put the super in front. But Mike, I just wanted to sit down and talk to you about, all the great things that you've done in terms of building with Patchwerk and just being an engineer, as you say. You worked with a lot of sessions here. You've seen a lot of things.
Done a lot of things. It's been a lot of years with a lot of different people.
How long have you been mixing?
A long time.
A long time? Yeah. You won't date yourself?
Well, everybody knows I've been doing stuff in the 90s, so since then at least. Yeah. So if you want to sit there and do the math. Then,
right.
But yeah, that's when I started, was in the 90s.
What do you love most about mixing and being like behind the boards, I guess?
Well, I mean, the creativity aspect, I think, is the biggest thing that pretty much anybody that does music or engineers or is even involved in it, even if you're like an A&R, I mean, that's the reason you're involved, is for the creativity that people are bringing and what they're able to, the feelings that they're able to put out so other people can hear them and get the feelings from the songs. Right. Everybody, that's why people listen to music, because they relate to it at that time. And that's the cool thing about it. So I think when I was mixing and doing a lot of that kind of stuff, it's the creativity you bring to it, because it's a dual effort. So the artist has ideas, and as an engineer, your goal is to try to bring those out in a way that they're feeling it. Mm-hmm. They hear it in their head, and then you have to kind of make that happen so that other people hear what they're kind of feeling. Yeah. Yeah. So it's a double creative process.
People that know you know that you're really into different types of music, and you have your preference. Like, who's your favorite artist of all time?
I got two bands they're bands, they're not people, bands. But yeah, they're of all time would be Led Zeppelin and David Gilmour, mainly because of not David Gilmour, but he plays for Pink Floyd. So Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd are my two favorite, and mainly because of the guitar players, Jimmy Page and David Gilmour, because I'm a guitar player. So that really always drew me in, since I've been playing guitar since I was a kid. So those are the bands that they're just like the whole thing as far as, to me, as like songwriters and producers, and the way that they put material together and make you feel it.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
Some of and people don't even notice, but so Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon was on the charts for almost 10 years. It was on the Billboard Top 200 for almost 10 to it might have been really? 20 years. And then when it came back out, when CDs came out, this was back when records, that came out in 74. And then when we re-released things on CD, then it popped back up. On the Billboard 200 again. So this is the record that had been on the Billboard 200 for the longest.
That's crazy. So, I never knew that.
Yeah.
That's dope. I said that, and I asked your favorite bands, your favorite artists of all time, because you have, not that you have to, but you have worked with a lot of different types of artists that come through Patchwerk, and people enjoy working with you, it seems like, because they keep coming and requesting, or they have kept coming to Patchwerk for Mike. So I want him to specifically mix my record. Why do you think that is, and why is it important for you as an engineer to be able to work with people?
I think people always work with people that they feel comfortable with, and I think that when people are able to relate to them and they get the sound, I think that's with any occupation, really. It's, you're going to go to the same guy at the gym to train you if that's who you relate with, and he does kind of the things that you're looking to do, or, any kind of occupation I feel is the same in that kind of general direction. I think what I bring to the table is, sometimes I think I bring a little bit something different, because a lot of people, like I say, I listen to different bands and things. I don't necessarily listen to hip hop every day. I do listen to hip hop, but I don't listen to it. It's not my mainstream of what I grew up with. So I think sometimes I bring elements that are different that people aren't necessarily used to hearing in all the hip hop music. And they're like, oh, that's cool. Because when I think about a song, I think about a band playing it. I don't care whether you're a solo hip hop artist or you're a giant orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
I still look at it as like I'm watching you on stage. So I see you up there and I'm thinking, okay, where would the pieces of this record go to make it feel like I'm watching a live performance?
Right.
So I don't think a lot of times people don't necessarily think of that. I think sometimes when people are doing rap music, they kind of think of, well, there's the guy rapping and that's the guy rapping. And that's, and so that's what that's what they're trying to work with. I'm like, well, it's a song. So you want to bring everything and imagine. And a lot of this, I guess I got from, because I've seen like back when I was working with Outkast and stuff like that, they did live shows and it wasn't tracks. Yeah, they had drummers and a DJ and keyboards and they had the people. And I know that when we built the songs with them, they did it the same way. And that's what's, a little different is that they don't do that today. It's like, okay, here's my laptop and here's my jump drive with my song on it.
Right.
It's like, well, back then it was, okay, here's the bass player and here's the dude programming the drums and here's the guitar player and all the different pieces, and we put all the live instruments together. So I kind of, even doing those records, I was building it the same kind of way. And I think that today, a lot of people, while they don't get that collaboration and they feel like, well, they just buy the track and it's already done, they still feel like when I'm mixing a song, I'm looking at it the same way. So when I hear all the different instrumentation, even though, especially in hip hop, the drums are not like realistic as far as what a person could play.
Right.
They're cool drums and all, but it's not like somebody can't be doing that hi-hat and that snare at the same time. It's impossible. So, but I still try to create it the same kind of way. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a big tell of what, makes the song stand out a little bit differently.
Definitely. You spoke about Outkast and working with them early on. And, we know that Outkast they did start with Patchwerk in terms of like producing their debut album and everything and just like working in the old building, the old location. Mm-hmm. So were you involved in the beginning for Outkast or those early records?
Yeah, I did. I did a lot of the early stuff. Now I didn't start with Patchwerk as my first studio. Mm-hmm. So when I started at another studio in town that's no longer around, but it was the biggest studio in the city, and they did a lot of different stuff. So that's where I got involved basically, and I did a lot of my work over there with Outkast before I came over to Patchwerk.
Gotcha.
But the same, the Organized Noise guys they kind of put Outkast together and they did all the beats and stuff for them. So it kind of all transcribed across lines. It was like we would do things at the studio I was at, and then we would send the reels here, and then they would do things, and they would send them back, and it was all that kind of stuff back and forth. So the first early records I did with Outkast, I did at the other place, and then like when it got to like Aquemini and some of those later like the third, fourth, fifth records, then AT Aliens, I think I did that here. So I started working here, and I started doing a lot of that stuff here.
That's dope.
But the cool thing about Outkast was they were like pioneers. I mean, you cannot deny that the records are still so good today that they were back then. And still, they just kind of set trends and they kind of developed a style that was, it's Southern rap. I mean, it is what it is.
Right.
And they're the guys that kind of built it and developed it as far as I'm concerned. And a lot of guys take it from there and have made it bigger, like Ludacris. He's made it his own kind of style out of it, and they all contributed to what it is, to what people think of Southern rap. But those guys to me were like the beginning of it all.
Absolutely.
And just the style, like I said when I was talking about they would bring in a live bass player and a live guitar player, and everybody would just jam and collaborate. You got an idea? And somebody would just put down a drum beat, and somebody would lay a bass line to her, and that was kind of how a lot of it developed. And that's a little bit different about what's today. Yeah. Because today it doesn't do that. People
and that's what I was going to ask you. Like, what is the difference, the big, huge difference in working at those sessions back then to today, and how, obviously technology and things have changed. So those are the obvious differences. But like in terms of what you appreciated about back then versus today or vice versa.
Well, there's lots of cool things about the technology. Because as of today, people ask occasionally about, well, I want to use tape. I want to record to a tape. I'm like, no, you really don't want to record the tape because you don't understand like what's involved in it. And while it's cool, back then we were always set up to do tape, so it was like no big deal. Mm-hmm. We got the machine set up, we're always aligning them, we're always working on. But the limitations, like the amount of time you get, 15 minutes on a reel, the cost of $250 a reel, and then just the basic studio time you got to pay to get everything kind of ready. That's the advantages today of using the digital. That's so much better. But I think back then it also, because you have, it's the world too. So it's a hurry up world. It's like, give me something now, give me something now, give me something now. Man, yeah, exactly. Nobody sits down and cooks.
I'm a part of the microwave generation, Mike. I can't lie.
It's just where things go. But back then, when you had to take that time to set up a tape machine, and you had to spend more time to do things, you spent more time doing things.
Right.
As opposed to, well, let me just knock this out because in 10 minutes, that particular audience is not going to be interested in this song anymore, and I got to have another one.
It's
That's not how
crazy.
it was. It was like we wrote albums. So when they put something together, they would put together the whole entire thing. You know, it's like, okay, well, we're going from start to end. It ain't just a song. It's a concept. It's an album. It's an idea about what we feel at that time. And that's a lot, especially with the Outkast, what they kind of brought to all of those different kind of sessions. And I kind of got off the question, I think, but
It's okay. You were just talking about today versus back then,
So,
but yeah.
yeah. So I think that's what a lot of people miss out on today. Some of these newer producers, while they got a lot of cool tools on the laptop, and they can do a lot of really cool things with the Pro Tools and all that kind of stuff, and Logic and things like that. I think they miss the collaboration part, because these days, even with collaboration, it's like, just email it to me. I'll do what I want. Instead,
Yeah, send
it's
it
not
back
like
to you.
everybody sitting together and saying, well, I'm gonna try this. Oh, dude, what if you put this note here?
Yeah.
And there's none of that as much. There's none of that as much as there used to be back then. Back then, it was just like, man, somebody would jump on something, and then somebody else would add something, then they would go a different little direction, and then the dude in the back would be scat singing a little bit, and it would just turn into a production that was a little different. And
Yeah.
I miss that.
You missed
Honestly,
that.
yeah, I miss that. I mean, today is a more hectic world, I feel like, and I get it, because back then people were buying records. They're not downloading free streams or whatever
Yeah,
they're doing on the
it all
internet.
changed.
It all changes. So the consumer, in the end, the consumer drives everything. People forget that. They always want to blame, oh, the label don't want to spend no money, or the consumer doesn't want to spend the money. And so if the end consumer doesn't want to pay for our CD, they don't want to pay $12 for a CD. They'd rather buy the one song for $1. Then you have to change your business mind and your structure. And that's what happened all across, not just to labels, but to artists. So artists think about, I just got to write that song. I don't got to write that album, because ain't nobody gonna buy the album. I need to write that song and then write another song and then write. So then a lot of times you get 5 really good songs, you know, as opposed to maybe they're doing fillers just to fill up the album. But I think the mindset is that if people are complaining about where it is, you got to look at, well, you guys are the end result, because if this is what you like and this is what you're purchasing and this is what you're allowing us to do as musicians, then that's kind of where we have to go.
Right.
Because musicians and people, just everybody in the music industry still has to make a living. This is what we do to get paid. It's funny, because a lot of times, especially back then in the early days, they would be like, so what do you do for a job? That's what they would ask me. I'm like, I'm doing this.
Right.
And they're like, you do this every day? Like, this is, because it was like a hobby.
Yeah.
You know, because it was expensive to work in studios and stuff. And so, but people need to recognize, it's like, no, this is a living. This is what people do. And, you know, there's more than just the artist. You got all the people in the backgrounds that make everything happen. I mean, none of this stuff would be happening without Kurt, but Kurt ain't pushed a button to record something in his entire life, right? But he puts all of this together to make all of this happen,
Right.
so that the music can get created. So people like that are just as important, you know, just like the A&Rs. If you don't got bean counters over there pushing out, like, this is the budget and this is where you get to go, you don't have the music getting created.
That's real.
You know,
I wanted to ask you too how you got involved with the business side, because, like I said, I introduced you as one of the co-owners of the studio, but you are also very creative, and a lot of times, you know, the creatives aren't necessarily the ones who are owning or leading. You lead a team of engineers here at Patchwerk, very phenomenal engineers. How did you get to that point? What was it for you that was important about being a part of Patchwerk and forever?
so we're talking about like back
The
early when I first
ownership.
started moving over, or buying it.
Buying it.
So this is my idea on buying a studio was always, hell no. I ain't never buying a studio.
Why?
Because the thing with the studio, and it's funny. So here's the philosophy of it, is that you're always chasing technology, right? To own a studio, you're spending all your money to keep up so that you can keep going, because this was the craziest thing, like when Pro Tools came out. So we had Pro Tools, whatever version then, at like 8 or whatever it was. So you get the next guy that just went to the Guitar Center and he has 10. He's like, man, I'm paying all this money to be at the studio and you guys only got Pro Tools 10 or only 8, and I got 10 on my laptop, because they just bought it. But it's like, yeah, but you bought it and just put it on your laptop. I got to upgrade.
I
got to upgrade 5 rooms and
Mm-hmm.
all these interfaces. It cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's why, because this is still functional. But that's the idea that you have to chase. And that's why when I was working here, I see it happening all the time. I'm hearing it from clients and occasionally with different things. And it's one of those things. I said, man, I don't want to own a studio. That's too hard. But then when the situation came around, I'd been here so long, because that was in 2009 that me and Kurt bought the studio. So I'd been here, over 10 years. I think I'd been working Patchwerk since 97. So, you know, we're looking 10 or 12 years. It was like, all right, well, either you can buy the studio and keep it rolling, or you can find another place to work, because the studio would just close down, right? So maybe nobody buys it. maybe it doesn't keep going.
Yeah, that's true.
Or maybe it doesn't keep going like it is. Maybe somebody buys it and tears it down and puts a high rise here. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But when the opportunity came along, I just thought about it, and Kurt mentioned it to me. He said, well, are you interested? Because at that point, I think a lot of people had told him, well, if you're looking for a partner, because I think really it was originally Bob was going to sell it to Kurt, but Kurt wasn't able to do it by himself because it was too big of a step.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people had told him, well, Mike's been there as long as almost you have, minus a few years, and he pretty much. So when we built all this, I was involved ground up. So I know every cable, every connection, every screw is in this building, right? And so it was a good thing because Kurt was running the business end, and he really still needed somebody to kind of manage the day-to-day of how does this place stay together and not fall apart.
Right.
And so he approached me about it, and I thought about it, and I was like, I got that option. I can either invest into what I've already invested 12 years into, or I can walk away and try to start over somewhere else. And while still buying a studio, in my mind, I was like, I don't really want to do that because it's a constant, embattlement of investing money into it to keep up, to keep running. But I thought about it, I was like, well, that's really not any different than any other business. Right. You have to invest in it to keep it rolling, to keep it going. And just because we're technology based, that is the world. I mean, this was 2007, so it's like, granted, it's funny how things. It's just weird because things change at a rate that's just phenomenal.
Right.
Because I was just thinking that on the way over here. I was like, that we use tape from like, I don't know, it was like mid '60s, I think, when they developed multi-track recording. They were originally recording to 2-track, and you had to basically don't mess up. If you mess up, then everybody has to play again. Prior to that, it was like cutting straight to the vinyl. Mess up, okay, now we got to throw the record away. Now we got to cut a new one. So then from '64 to, man, we used tape in here until '02. That's a big, it's like 30 years or 30 or 40 years, whatever, 40 years of using the same medium. Now we're at computers, and I know that we've changed. That technology just keeps consistently changing. You look at, like, they had records for the longest. Then they did CDs, or did think it's cassettes for a little while. Then they did, but now it's like, okay, we got out of CDs quick. Now we're into streaming. First it was like, okay, now you can get a WAV file. Oh, now we're going to stream it. Oh, now it's going to. So the technology is phenomenally changing at paces that you can't keep up with. But I think back to what I was saying, as far as the kind of keeping up with the technology, is that any business I would have tried to move into or gone forward in or anything else, I'd still be in that same position because everything is technology based now. And that's where, that's where the huge jump was in the markets, and all that kind of stuff was all on web based, doing things technology based. And that's where everything is kind of jumping.
Going.
So that was why I kind of made the decision to go ahead and purchase. And plus, I mean, I love the studio, and it was what I do. Right. And, it was a different thing to kind of try. And it didn't really change my role because Kurt still ran the studio, and I still did all the technical work and fixing and repairs.
The handyman. You're
the handyman,
around
exactly.
doing his whatever. I see Mike on a ladder, and I'm just not even surprised.
Yeah. So, I mean, yesterday I mowed the grass. So it's like, it's like, I don't know. It's just, I don't mind doing those things that keep everything running. Yeah. And I've always told people, stay in your lane, right? So I've always been good at that. I always do things with my hands. I've always, I mowed grass in my house since I was a kid, right? That's what my dad told me. He's like, go ahead and mow the grass. Mow the grass, mow the grass. So I was like, when I got here, I'm like, I hired somebody for a little while, and then they quit doing it. And I was like, I don't do it myself. Just went back to mowing the grass again. So it's little stuff that just, I don't mind doing it. And I've always told people here, especially like all the intern staff assistant guys, it's like, if I'm asking you to do it, I've already done it. So I know what it's like. Which is what I appreciated, because for those that don't know, I worked here at the front desk for a year or so, and just seeing that you guys, you and Kurt both are willing to go and do it yourselves, I think that helps y'all be the best leaders and owners of the studio, is because that y'all had already been working here, so you knew kind of like what was going on already. You knew how things should be and what improvements could be made, essentially. Yeah, I think it makes it easier when you're managing people and trying to direct them to do the things that you kind of want to get done that need. And that's what I kind of tell people. I tell people all the time, I'm like, I don't make rules because I'm bored and I just want to make up rules. I have to make rules because something happened. And that creates, just like any law gets made. I mean, they didn't have drunk driving laws until somebody ran over somebody that was drunk, right? So it's the same kind of idea here. We don't try to make rules up so when people get mad, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. It's like, because it creates this problem. Mm-hmm. It creates this situation. So that's kind of what all those things are for. And I think it does help that I've been through so many of these things and seen so many of the different things happen that you kind of understand that, okay, when you're directing people, it's easier to understand why, and I try to explain to people. Sometimes I don't explain and people get upset. Now I don't get it, but I'm like, just trust me. It's because of this reason that it's, or
Yeah, it's
whatever. So
important.
yeah, so I think you're right. It does make it a little easier to having been around so long as an employee.
Right.
It makes
First.
it the transition to an owner a little bit, because I see both sides. So a lot of times too, I can advocate for the engineer in some situations, because sometimes you just don't understand if you weren't the guy sitting back here.
Exactly.
And so when they explain to me like, man, I can't get this to happen, or then I get it. I'm like, okay, I get it. I mean, you need to do better at this, but I get what you're saying, because it is hard. At times trying to separate yourself from these certain things. And I guess the hardest part I have with that is sometimes I keep forgetting that I'm this far down. I'm 20 years past everybody else. So when these new guys come in, I'm like, why can't you do this? And I'm like, yeah, I kind of forgot. And I have 20 years of experience ahead of you. So yeah, probably you don't know this.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to explain it to you and why it's important. And then maybe you'll get it.
But I mean, I think that will push them, and it has, like, from what I've seen, just, being part of Patchwerk, is that the engineers that do come through here are like really, like they were interns first. Like you guys have a system almost of how you train and get the best out of anybody. If you love engineering essentially and you wanted to actually work here, then you'll get what you want out of it, because you have to go through the same process almost.
Yeah, I mean the engineering program here especially is like, what I like to say is we kind of hire from within.
Right.
So I don't typically I'm not going to throw out an ad and say, hey, engineers, we need a new engineer. No, it's like, well, we like to take them from within, because it's a philosophy. Like Patchwerk isn't just like a location, right? And so you come in and you're like, okay, turn up that knob and learn how to hit 3 on the keyboard. Now you're an engineer. Now it's a process. You have to learn the Patchwerk way, is kind of what I call it. And the reason I explained it, even if you're not going to end up, because we can't hire everybody that comes through here as an intern, but even if you're going to go on to be an engineer somewhere else or doing it, I know this is going to be on your resume. Nobody's not going to put
Patchwerk
working here on your resume. So when they do that, I want to make sure that they're understanding the whole philosophy, because even when they go somewhere else and they say, well, I worked at Patchwerk, but then their work is sloppy, I don't want people looking back and saying, man, they train these kind of people at Patchwerk. That's bad. So all of those little stuff is important. So that when you go because my philosophy on the engineering especially is, you can't be a good assistant if you're not a good intern. You can't be a good engineer if you weren't a good assistant. And you definitely can't mix songs if you don't even know how to track songs. So all of those things in that order is what's really important. So a lot of the guys that come in here and they got that, and I can't say the schools create this, but if they are schools listening to me, stop telling these guys they can go out of here and be the next top guy. I mean, that's a dream and it's something that they should definitely push for, but learn the basics and then you can be great at the parts further down. I mean, it's really hard to mix a song properly if you don't even understand how to basically record with a compressor. And so all of those things are important, and everybody can be a great mix engineer that's an engineer. Everybody has good ideas, if you're an engineer and you're in this and you're creative and you're wanting to put your ideas out, but just understanding the basics is important. So that's what we try to start with just the interning program, because a lot of people get upset. They're like, why is he always on us about how come this light bulb ain't changed? Because that's attention to detail. And if you're not paying attention to the light bulbs, which is your task,
right, then
are you paying attention to the mic height when the guy's in there recording? Are you paying attention to your levels when you're printing your mix?
That's true.
That's all attention to detail. So this stuff is real important.
What other skills? What other skills do you feel like a great engineer possesses? Like aside from attention to detail, listening.
Yeah, and I will have to say that's taken a lot of years for me to develop. I mean, I can hear things, right? I mean, and I don't know if like this. And this is in like, I guess, relationships with people. It's like you hear all the time, man, you're hearing me, but you ain't listening.
Listening, right? Yeah.
And that's right. And that's, as an engineer, it took me a lot of years to get past the point of, no, I'm right because I'm the engineer. I never said that, but as I started to do more and more, I started trying to listen more and more to people. And like, so they give you ideas and you're like, in my mind, I'm like, that's crazy. That shit ain't going to work. But I gave up on that and said, you know what, I'm going to try all these things, because I started to learn that 50% of that stuff worked.
Right.
And at least if I try it, and then and it doesn't work, the client knows it didn't work. I know it didn't work. Nobody's mad. And we move on to the next thing that they do. Exactly. And a lot of times it's not even that it won't work. It's just the way people explain it is different than the way maybe I would explain it. So it's trying to understand it. Because a lot of people say strange words that, if I want something brighter, I'm going to say brighter. But people say, well, make it crispy. Well, that's different, but you learn. Or make it fat. Okay, let's add some more bottom on it and make it a little wider. So it's just different terminology. And a lot of times as an engineer, you have to listen to what they're saying, not try to just be like so literal about, because a lot of times people will just say, man, just turn that up. And it's like, no, really all I need to do is move it over here to the right a little bit so it sticks out. They just want it to be there, but not obtrusive. Right. So if I just turn it up, that's not going to be right. But you have to learn how to listen to really what they're saying. And kind of get that from, I think that's really important. And the other big thing that engineers have to have that's not part of the technical part is just like people skills, which I don't have the greatest people skills when it comes to one-on-one, but in a session, you have to be able to kind of know that these are creative people. And so feelings are a little bit, and emotions are a little touchier than like in the business world. Right. So like you tell somebody in the business world something, it's like, it's business, whatever. But when you're in a creative environment and it's their idea and it's their, what's inside of them that they're just not being able to get out of you, then you got to understand they get frustrated, and you have to be able to kind of just have a little people skills with that situation. And sometimes, I mean, like people say it's not a people skill, but a lot of times telling people the truth is a people skill. Definitely. And like, I'm not just one of those like guys in your session that says, yeah, that's hot. Right. If it's garbage, yes, man. I'm going to tell you. Yeah. And people get mad. And then I just kind of tell them, I'm like, well, look, I don't like it, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's right or wrong. Right. That just means, I mean, I'm not your consumer, right? I'm the guy mixing the song. So I'm not necessarily your consumer. Now, this is my opinion, and everybody has one. And what you want to do is cool. I'll do whatever you want to do on it, but that's my particular opinion on it. So, you know, I mean, while people may not say that's that's not a good people skill. It's like, no, it really is, because you're helping somebody not put this thing out in front of everybody else, and it's something that you know is wrong. My mom used to always say, "You rather me tell you than somebody else." Yep. We actually had a team bonding. I didn't mean to cut you off, but we had a team bonding event here, or I guess like day out here, and we went to the escape room. And I thought that was like super cool at the time. Like I was so we weren't on the same team, I don't think. No, I don't think we were. But we both teams escaped. And I think that talks a little bit about like problem solving and how important that is for, I mean, any team in general, but especially for engineers, because a lot of times I see y'all trying to fix stuff and figure out like, because some things just happen. Like you don't know what is making it crackle or whatever, make this sound when we try to set up for the podcast. But then I see the engineers trying to solve the problem. So is that like a major thing that you need to know how to just be able to do? I don't think it's major that you need to know how to like necessarily understand what the problem is, like, but it's necessary for you to figure a workaround. That's more important to me than like, oh, well, I got to figure out why this is crackling. Is it a capacitor in here that's just gone blown? I mean, that's a lot of technical stuff. But figure a way, like this board is huge. It's got 80 channels on this thing. You got 2 microphones hooked up. You can't figure another way to hook up to make the microphone work without using whatever, you know. So a lot of times I'm like, stop wasting 15 minutes trying to fix the path you got. Make a new path. You know, cut instead of, you know, the woods are open, just go a different direction. You don't have to stay on this path. If there's a giant dam in front of you, just walk around it. Yeah, that's true. So it's not necessarily as much the ability to resolve the problem, other than more of a ability to like, just let's get around the problem. Then, you know, and what I tell them all is like, if you got a problem, you tell me about it and I will fix it out later or whatever, or we'll reproduce it and try to figure out what was wrong. But for now, get around it. Time. Exactly. Don't stand there for 15 minutes, because the client's going to look at you like you're crazy if you're taking 30 minutes to figure out something that in a facility like this shouldn't be broken or shouldn't be happening or whatever. And, you know, so the workarounds is a big thing as far as just try to get around it and that kind of thing. So problem solving is, at least my thing is at least try. You may not be able to fix it, but you at least got to try. But don't try too long before you call somebody that might already know the answer. Exactly. Because a lot of times it's like, you can call me, yeah, do this, because it's a problem I may have know that I can't. It's not like there's a lot of glitches in Pro Tools that happen, and I know what they are. And so I try to tell people what they are, but a lot of times another one will come up and I just know about it. And I'm like, okay, well, you just need to do this. Right. And then it'll make it go away. So tell me about one of your favorite sessions ever, aside from Outkast. We talked about that. You mentioned that those were some of your fun times, you know, mixing, being behind the boards. But tell me about some other sessions, because I know there's a lot of stuff that's happened that you've seen, even if it wasn't necessarily the music, just like experiences you've had here at Patchwerk. I got a couple of ones that like stand out, probably like 3 or 4. I guess one of the main ones I liked here was when I did the Beyonce record. Because, you know, you're used to people of her skill level and just her fame, right? Of they're going to be coming rolling in here with 50 people and they got all it was just her. You know, I think she had I never even saw a bodyguard, but I think she had somebody that was sitting somewhere in the hallway or something. Never saw him, which is even cooler, because then he's not you don't feel like there's this big
Distract,
dude over there,
over your shoulders,
standing there. Yeah, well, So, but when she came, it was just her. She came into the studio, and we were doing two different things. We were doing some vocals on one of her records, and then we were also doing vocals on a Missy Elliott record.
Dope.
And so, she called Missy on the studio phone, and then had her on speaker, and they're just sitting there discussing it. Like, she's basically, Missy's telling her, oh, try doing this, and it's just the two of them.
That's so
and
cool.
She's in there, and she's just knocking it out. And we had a conversation. This was right after she did that movie on the Austin Powers movie.
Austin Powers,
so
remember?
We talked about that, and the fat suit that Austin Powers was wearing, and then and then her role in it, and how she's like, yeah. So we talked about that for a while, and it was just like a conversation like we're having.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost the same kind of conversation. It wasn't pressure. It wasn't I'm too good to be talking to you.
Right.
She was just like, you're just another person in this creative process, and Missy was staying on the phone. And it was like just the three of us.
That's dope.
And we did two songs, and actually both of them went for Grammys.
Yeah.
So one record won, and then the other one was it won contemporary R&B. Was Beyonce won that one, and then the Missy Elliott lost to it was for record of the year under construction. It was on that record, and I went to the Grammys and all, but it lost out to the Outkast record. What was the Speaker Box? I guess that was.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Love
the one
Above?
that had Hey Yeah.
Yeah.
That one, and everybody already kind of knew that was the record that was going to win, because that record was hot.
It was.
And so, but it was a really cool experience, and that's both of those songs was for that for those Grammys that year,
so
that
cool.
one session. So that was a really cool experience. And then the other one where it's like just to show everybody that people make tons of mistakes. It happens in this world, but it's how you fix those mistakes, or how people respond to those mistakes. A lot of times I don't necessarily respond well. I need to learn probably better on that. But I was in a Chameleonaire session, and this was in Pro Tools. It was, we hadn't been using it a ton of time. I mean, it wasn't brand new, but it was relatively, some glitches still, little things maybe, definitely I didn't understand in it exactly. And other engineers have been bit by the same particular thing. But basically we had done this session, we had the whole session in there, and he had done a bunch of stuff on it. And I erased the entire edit desk. Now, I didn't delete the files. The files were still on the drive, but everything just went gone off the screen.
Sheesh.
I hit one wrong keystroke, and it was like, gone. And, I mean, you just like, man, I just wasted this guy's whole song. And the thing is that I realized what I had done, and I realized the files were still there, but I also realized I had to fix this. And so instead of trying to hide it, I just went to the guy. He was in the lounge, and I was like, look, man, so I hit a wrong keystroke, and I basically wiped your whole song. I said, he said, well, what does that mean? And I said, well, it's still there, but I need to hand place everything back into the song and line everything back up. So and he was just sitting there. He just looked at it. He's like, okay. And he said, call me when you're done. And so I was in there. It took me about an hour and a half, to sit there, and I had to take every single track and drag it over, and I had to hand move it to line everything back up exactly where it went. And it was tedious, but that guy's reaction changed my whole perspective on artists, and actually a lot of things about the music business, because he could have freaked out. He could have just gone off. He could have whooped my ass standing right there, but he didn't do that. He just was like, okay, you say you can fix it. I believe you can fix it, and I'm not going to trip on it. And so I fixed it. We put it back together. He finished the song, and he was happy. And I mean, we got a plaque out there for that one.
That's awesome.
So, it's interesting to see different people's reactions. And the best artists I've ever worked with are the most established artists that have been doing it the longest and recognize everybody's position is important. So I that's the thing that I think, with all these plaques you see on the wall, these are a lot of the most humble people. They're not what you might think. And I think a lot of people get a weird perception that they're all divas and they're all, all about this and that. And it's like, no, they're really not. They're really cool people that are just like everybody else. They just happen to have a skill in music that they're able to exploit and share with the world. So those were two really cool things that I think, I always had to tell people about those kind of things, because it was really cool. And then like TLC was another one that was really cool, because that was my first session I ever did.
Really?
And
TLC?
It was Waterfalls. And the engineer happened to get sick. I was just an assistant. And he asked me, the engineer knew me well, and he said, well, can you cut the vocals? And so I worked with Chili and cut all the vocals, all her background vocals on that. And what was really cool about her is that, that record sold, I don't know, at the time it had sold 13.
It was a crazy
13.
record.
Well, the record, Black Eyed Guys got like 13 million sold. I know it sold more than that since then. But the coolest thing about her was she went to the label and made sure I got my engineering credits, which she did not have to do.
Right.
And so you just see little things like that, and you're like, man, these people really do recognize your role as an engineer is not just you're just some knucklehead over here pushing a button, that you're part of the creative process. And those kind of artists you really appreciate, and you really understand that, like, yeah, I am part of this process, and
Right.
that's cool.
Right.
You know,
Definitely.
so
You are obviously just in that statement recognize that you have value as an engineer. I think because things have changed tremendously as 2017 in terms of like how many people are doing this. Even like, everybody wants to be an artist, but a lot of people want to be engineers. A lot of people want to be producers. Like, it's so many people that are a part of the music industry. What would you recommend or suggest to like young engineers that are listening in terms of like how they can get success in this and like become, I guess, great at
yeah.
what it is?
I wish I really had an answer for that, but because things are so different now, I think that the basics I can still tell you the same thing. That to me is like you have to be willing to do what it takes. And so a lot of people come in and they're like, "Man, I had to stay up late. You guys
Yeah, I was
were
about
open
to say
until
time
7 in the morning."
hours.
So we've had several interns that come in and they quit after like the first or second day because they had to stay here and do some food runs until. But that was what you kind of signed up for. And music people work at night. It's a lot of things happen in the daytime, and here we're one of those facilities that we are able to fill the daytimes with a lot of stuff too. Not necessarily all the music is at night, but that is kind of the nature of the animal. And so if you're not cool with that, and you're not cool with working long hours, because sessions are 12 hours, 16 hours, they're long.
Mm-hmm.
Then you might want to think about a different career path, because if you're wanting to work, 9 to 5, this is not the business for that.
Mm-mm.
This business is ruthless as far as the amount of time it takes from you. I remember when I was starting and doing stuff, it was like, no, there's no social life. You don't plan. And most people I know, that even people that were like voiceover talents and A&R people, anybody that was like involved in it was like, you don't make plans. This is what you do. You chose this is to be part of your life. And so it becomes part of what you do. So trying to say, what can I do to make this better? Well, you have to recognize that this is a lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just like a corporate job. And it was funny because I did work at a studio one time, and there was a guy there that he would get up, it would be like 5 o'clock, he'd pick his little cooler up and he'd just walk out of the session, and so I took over the session, and yeah, of course he got fired, but he was like, I just work 9 to 5. And I'm like, not in this lifetime. So,
right.
And I was just, another person at the studio. I didn't own the studio or anything, but that was just odd to me that's kind of weird. But I guess a lot of people kind of get to that point, if you've been doing it a long time. I mean, granted, now I don't work doing overnight sessions and things like that, but I'm not starting.
Right.
So it's different.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of people got to look at it as like, well, he gets to do it. It's like, yeah, but you're
I've been
starting.
doing it. Yeah.
So,
and then you also have a family.
Yeah.
And, like, I think that's the other question that I would have for you is just like balance for you. How is it for you to balance like having a family, having children? You take a vacation like every blue moon. Well,
I mean, I think a lot of that isn't necessarily the way I live it. It's like, what is your other half cool with? Now, if you have a spouse that's like, you got to be home at this time and I expect you're not going to be able to do this, because you have to have somebody on the other side that recognizes what your career is
and understands.
And if you're one of those people that and let's say that you're the opposite, let's say your spouse is the one doing music, you better be able to understand that, or you better not be able to, or you better not get with that person, because it's going to be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Now my wife is musical, and she writes and she does songs, and we've done a few things for some TV shows and some things like that. So she already understands the business a little bit, and she understands kind of what's involved and things like that. So it makes it a little bit easier. But if you got one of those kind of spouses that's just like on you, calling, texting all day long, this is not the career for you. So you need to think differently. Either you need to get a new career, or you need to get a new second half.
Situation.
Because
yeah.
And that's rude to say probably, but it is. I mean,
it's reality.
Yeah. I mean, and if you have the right person, they're going to understand that you're not out there messing around. You're working.
Yeah.
Because this is a job, and it's not, and it can be tiring, and it attacks you. And it's the thing about this job, that the music in general, it's emotional. So it's not like, oh, I'm just doing spreadsheets at work, I'll just go home.
No,
and you're in the vibe of that thing. You can't just pick up and walk out. It's like, man, I got to get this out. I got to get this down. And so when the artist wants to go back in, I got this line. I want this in there. I'm feeling it.
You're attached.
You got to do
record.
it now.
Yeah.
And you got to get it in. You can't say, well, you know what? Let's just stop. You'll feel that tomorrow. It's like, no, they won't feel it tomorrow. It'll be completely different.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing about, you got to be ready to kind of grab that when you can grab it. I mean, that's another thing I kind of tell the engineers. It's like, you need to be ready to get a recording in 30 seconds when they come in the booth, because sometimes they walk in there and that's the take. And if you haven't got your levels adjusted right, you just blew the take, and they're going to be upset, because it's like, man, dude, that was the one. Although maybe it wasn't the best take they could have, but if there's the emotion there, it's not necessarily did they hit it right on the one every time. It's like, man, that's part of the swing. That's part of the feel. That's part of what it is. So you have to be ready. And I think balancing all that kind of stuff, while it can be hard to do, you just kind of got to, figure that part into when you're starting. Like, is this really what I want to do? Because like engineers that constantly turn down sessions, pick another career, because you're not ready for this. Your life is about you've chosen a lifestyle, and so you have to be ready to do this. And if you're constantly going to be turning down sessions, and you're like, I got other things to do. I'm going out Friday night, this and that. You just get a 9-to-5 job, man.
To where you can have that, yeah.
Go do something else, because it doesn't matter what part of music you're in. It's a 24-hour job. I mean, they might call you. A&R's got to book sessions all the time. So even if you're on that end of it, you constantly have to, be awake and be ready and be able to do things that are required of you to do it. As a manager, the artist is like, I want to go do this. It's like, you better be awake and be ready to do what you need to do. And then same with, so as interns, assistants, engineers, the studio itself, that's why we're open 24 hours a day. That's the lifestyle. And so, so I think that the balance is not hard to do if you have a good partner and you have a good understanding of what you are here to do.
Absolutely.
I think.
Yeah. Mike, it was very insightful. You've done so much. It's like I want to talk to you all day here at Patchwerk, and like I hope you recognize the value of you just what you do here for not only the engineers but just the whole building and like the history of Patchwerk and the city of Atlanta. You're Atlanta native.
Yeah,
you are.
I've been No, not Atlanta native. No. I moved here. No, I'm Virginia native. So
Virginia native.
I moved here for school actually.
Oh, wow.
So I went to Art Institute to go for engineering.
Dope. But you've been here for a while.
But
so
I've been here since
You're a Falcons fan.
Yeah. Yeah, they're making me a little mad this year with the stadium.
I know.
But, I can't. I like the Falcons. They're my team. They've been my team forever. I've been Falcons fan since Bob owned the studio and gave me free tickets. That's when I became a Falcons fan. We used to sit on the second row on the 20-yard line every game. He would give us tickets to go.
That's so lit.
So it was nice. But yeah, Atlanta's my home now. I don't really Virginia's where I'm from, but Atlanta's my home. Yeah. So, and I think I feel like, that Patchwerk has been part of building what the music is here. Because, it really kind of kicked off. I left Virginia right before all that stuff with the Neptunes and Missy Elliott. Mm-hmm. So they became, where I was from, became kind of like, oh, that's music going on there. But it wasn't happening when I was there. So it was like, if you weren't in the armed forces, there wasn't a lot going on up there. Yeah. So, coming to Atlanta was kind of a jump for me just to kick off a whole career. So I kind of just threw my junk in a U-Haul and moved down here. Like a lot of people do, that want to kind of start up. And I knew LA was no choice. I was not about to go out there. So Atlanta was a good choice, I think, for me. And like I said, the school I wanted to go to was here. It's
made the
been
right
a good
decision.
ride. Yeah, it's been a good ride.
That's dope. Well, thank you, Mike, for sitting down. I know y'all got meetings and other things to take care of today, but I appreciate you coming out here. Are you on social media? You active at all on social media? I have to ask.
Yeah, so my position on social media is new. I don't do social media. I'm not a big fan of it. I'd rather make a phone call and talk to somebody than text all day. But if you want to find out anything I'm doing, you got to follow the Patchwerk stuff.
Yeah.
We do videos occasionally of me a day in the
Record
office
of
with
the
me
day.
fixing. Oh yeah, we do plaque of the month. I do things of me fixing junk here and there, so you can see little things that I might be doing. But all the stuff I do is just through the Patchwerk social media. I don't have any separated social media.
And if y'all will need to get in touch, he'll be here.
Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you so much, Mike Wilson, for sitting down with me. As always, you guys can follow me on social media at Sammy Approved on all social media platforms. And thank you for tuning into the Audio Music Podcast once again. Appreciate y'all. Sonically superior.